A fireside.
The members. I'm calling Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising to speak on this government notice of motion today because the national government has insisted on privatising our state-owned energy companies, including selling 49% of Meridian at an extremely poor time to be selling electricity assets. John Key persisted with the asset sales despite the fact that they're very unpopular with New Zealanders, who voted 2-1 against the partial privatisation in a citizens-initiated referendum last year. John Key has persisted in the asset sales even though they don't make economic sense. Even the Dominion Post, not exactly known as a progressive publication, has described the asset sales as bordering on, I quote, economic vandalism. So the asset sales, including the partial privatization of Meridian, have cost over $500 million to date, once we include the partial sale of Genesis, which the government has announced. And the government's excuse for the privatization and the sale of 49% of Meridian Energy was that it was going to help us pay down debt. Now, we know that that's not true. Treasury's own numbers show that the partial sale of our state-owned energy companies is actually costing us money. It's actually costing us quite a good deal of money, $500 million. It's actually worsening the Crown's fiscal position because the returns that these companies were earning were higher than the cost of borrowing. So it's not actually paying down debt. If anything, we've seen numbers that show that it's actually going to reduce the government's surplus in several years' time, the fact that they've sold some of these highly productive assets. We also know that the national government actually created their own hole in the budget by giving away tax cuts to the top 10% of income earners. And these tax cuts to the top 10% of income earners are going to have cost us more by the election this year than we will have earned by selling off our productive energy companies. So the total revenue from the asset sales thus far is less than $4 billion, yet the tax cuts will have cost us more than $4 billion by the election this year. The national government is quite keen to sign us up for new debt in the shape of sneaky public-private partnerships for motorways that have extremely poor business cases, like Puhoi to Warkworth and Transmission Gully. So why would the national government go ahead with this partial privatization, the sale of our productive, publicly owned energy companies, including 49% of Meridian, if it doesn't make economic sense? The answer is that it benefits their mates, and there's a bit of political ideology going on here. Earlier today, the finance minister said that government simply wasn't a good 100% owner of state-owned energy companies. Well, clearly there is a little bit of that ideology against public ownership that's going on here with this national party, but also it was really their mates, the top 2%, who had piles of cash sitting around, who were able to buy up these assets at a really good price. The taxpayer got a bit shortchanged in the sale of Meridian Energy, but the top 2% of New Zealanders who had thousands of dollars just sitting around to invest in energy companies got a really good deal, and potentially they'll be earning those returns instead of New Zealand mums and dads, taxpayers, who would have been earning the returns on those companies if we had maintained public ownership. The Green Party was proud to stand up against the privatization of Meridian Energy. We're very proud to have brought to the attention of the public the high cost of it. Let me just enumerate the different costs in the sale of our SOEs, including Meridian. There's the cost to Treasury and the energy companies themselves, the giveaways to share buyers, the foregone dividends that we won't be getting back in years to come, the losses on the sale, and to top it all off, a payout to Rio Tinto. And if you add all of that up together, we're almost at $500 million, and the direct sales of Genesis are likely to total a further $20 million, plus tens of millions for the bonus share giveaway, and potentially much more. Now, that $500 million could have been used for other things that would actually generate a return for New Zealanders. We could have employed literally hundreds or thousands of teachers and nurses, improving our health system, improving our education system. That's the type of investment that the Green Party would like to make in our country, not selling off public assets to benefit the top 2%, not selling off public assets and forgoing dividends for years to come and giving a subsidy to a private company, Rio Tinto, in order to keep the share prices of Meridian a little bit higher, although they still was a bit of a fire sale. The Green Party's put forward positive solutions to households' high energy costs. One of those was Empowering New Zealand, which was a discussion document on electricity reform. We announced it at the same time that the Labour Party announced a similar inquiry into the possibility of electricity reform, so it's colloquially known as New Zealand Power. Just to give you an example of how New Zealand Power would work, is basically establishing a single buyer that will negotiate cheaper power prices for all of us. Because we all know that despite the fact, as the Finance Minister just said, electricity demand is flat, prices for households have been going up. And Kiwis are paying $360 more for power per year since the national government came to power. That is a sign that our electricity market isn't working, and it's because it's dominated by the 4 big gentailers. And the partial sale and privatization of the publicly owned gentailers isn't going to reduce power prices for New Zealanders. If anything, it will do the opposite. As foreign private owners of those shares and those companies seek to maximize returns, there will be pressure on the companies to ratchet up power prices even more. So the partial privatization has cost the taxpayer. It's going to end up costing households. And the Green Party is here with a solution which will not only bring down power prices by ensuring that we have a single buyer that can negotiate with these now privately owned power companies, just like TY Point has been able to directly negotiate cheap power prices with Meridian Energy for many years, New Zealand Power will act in the same way by negotiating on behalf of households. We also obviously want to strengthen the role of energy efficiency and green energy within our electricity system. Now, Meridian Energy for a long time has had a focus on renewables, but arguably they're the only big player who has, and it's just due to the fact that they're highly invested in hydropower. What we need is some mandate in the electricity market. We need someone with a mandate to focus on new renewable generation and where that's going to come from. The national government is not on track to meet their own target of 90% renewable generation by 2025. It's very difficult to see how the partial privatization, particularly the partial privatization of Meridian, is going to help in that respect. So the Green Party is proposing a smart idea that is not only going to bring down power prices for New Zealanders, but it's going to get a better deal for taxpayers, and it's going to help increase the share of renewable generation. Of course, the other smart idea that we announced recently was the whole solar homes package, which does not, unlike the government's subsidy to Rio Tinto to prop up the price of Meridian Energy, does not involve a direct subsidy to anyone, but it does harness the Crown's lower cost of borrowing, pass on those benefits to regular New Zealand households to help them purchase photovoltaic solar panels, which will help them be more independent, reduce their power prices, and increase the total reliability of our network by having microgeneration spread across a wider number of households. And it will increase the total amount of renewable electricity that's being used here in New Zealand, because the Green Party cares about New Zealand families and households, and we care about the long-term future of this country. And if we're going to deal with long-term challenges like climate change, we need to be investing now. We need those smart policies now. Privatization of Meridian Energy is taking us in the wrong direction. The Green Party wants to take us to a smarter, greener future.
The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Labor Party will be supporting the